John Rossman. Really enjoyed talking to John, former Amazon executive, was there from 2002 to 2005. He's now written three plus books on the Amazon principles. We go over some of the principles and what it means to businesses. And, I'm specifically interested in small businesses, of course, since I'm a small business owner and have lots of friends there. But he's adamant that the culture and the principles don't apply everywhere. They apply there at Amazon, but he goes into some of them and why they're important, why a mission. We talk about leadership, and I'm always intrigued. I always ask the difference between leadership and management. There's some managers that think they're leaders, etc., and what the difference is. But some of the shocking revelations of what Amazon has done. One of the biggest innovations that Amazon has ever had. What do you think that is? You're going to think AWS and Alexa and things like that. But I'll just tease you with this. In 1999, Amazon introduced free shipping. You think about what that's done to e-commerce in the industry. A fascinating conversation with John Rossman. He now helps businesses, enterprises, small businesses, leaders, owners with the principles and how to grow and how to make better decisions. We talk about the Amazon 2 pizza team rule. What do you think that is? Very interesting rule there. I really enjoyed this conversation with John. I know you will as well. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. And you're in the Northwest, about 3,000 miles away from you.
That's right.
John Rossman, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time. Now, you were an executive at Amazon between, I believe, 2002 and 2005. And I want to get into the principles of Amazon, but you're adamant in that the culture and the principles don't apply to all businesses. That some do and some don't. But what specific? I'm a small business. I work with a lot of SMB, small to medium sized businesses. What specifically do you recommend that you've learned and what you teach now and what you write about now for the SMB market?
Well, a number of different things. I think it would be first about being intentional about what leadership means. And leadership is like a process, it's a deliberate set of steps, and it has a mission that's attached to it. And so, whether these principles, either in its entirety or some of them, are right for you, being intentional about how you develop leadership is, I think, hard to go wrong with that notion. Being curious and passionate about your customers and being willing to explore more than just how you serve them today will lead you to innovate and to grow. Using metrics to really understand what the customer experience is and to drive truth seeking, root cause problem solving, and action within your team. To me, like, and that's just the start of some things that I believe are hard to argue with. They're kind of first principle truisms from, good leadership, good business management. Then there's some others that, maybe aren't for everybody, right? And you can pick and choose them a little bit along the way. But that's my quick answer to a good question.
Yeah, let's talk about leadership. All too often, I have found, and I've certainly made the mistake, that the difference between a leader and a manager.
Yeah, to me, I don't get um, hung up too much on parsing the differences between those. One is about doing the right thing, and the other is about kind of doing the thing right.
Hmm.
To me, I don't necessarily get um, wound up. I think that there are some tactical things that go into management that are really important, just like procedural things. And while that sounds like a bad word, like, oh, those things actually matter, both short term and long term. But then, leadership can encompass so much more. It can encompass having the intuition about what the mission should be and how to go about doing it. And it can also mean, I think a big part of leadership is about bringing along a group of people, inspiring a group of people to come along. One of the leadership principles from Amazon is called Think Big, and it reads like this: Thinking small is a self fulfilling prophecy.
Hmm.
Leaders create and communicate a bold direction that inspires results. They think differently and look around corners for ways to serve customers. To me, that is a big part. Like, there's two aspects of that: is A, the ability to really intuit, like, what's around the corner for customers, for our market, that we should do, and it's the ability to inspire others. So I think a big part of leadership is the ability to um, garner the attention and the best out of a group of people in order to accomplish a hard mission.
Hmm. Have you known managers that aren't leaders?
Oh yeah, I think you'd oftentimes refer to them as, like, bureaucrats, right?
Hmm.
Where essentially, like, they don't build anything, right? So one of the interesting phraseologies at Amazon is they talk about being a culture of builders, and builders are people who really like to create something. It doesn't mean you're a programmer or a mechanical engineer or something like that, but it's like, whether it's direct strategy, an insight about a market, a product specification, or actually building something. To some degree, selling is being a builder, because you are collaborating with a client to build an end state and a solution and figuring out how you can tie in there. Those are people that are building something, versus a bureaucrat is somebody who just kind of, like, manages work around, and everything. And I think that's um, a type of leader at a company that doesn't tend to actually have a lot of leadership, and they're playing, you would oftentimes describe them as being political, meaning they're playing
Hmm.
more for their personal benefit than for the team winning, for the enterprise winning, or for their customers winning.
Yeah, one of your pieces, you remarked how frustrating it can be to work with such people, and I agree.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just especially if you're in a business, in a like, I'm always about, like, I'm never good at maintaining the status quo, and so I'm
Hmm.
always about working on the new thing with my client, like new market, new product, new service, how to grow, how to innovate, how to scale something. It's never maintain the current state. And so when you are in the business of creating change, that type of persona, that type of person, like, there's lots of ways to work around them, and you try to corral them. Um, and you're always trying to understand like things through somebody else's eyes, right? Like that's the definition of having empathy, is like trying to understand like how they're seeing things, something. But at the end of the day, if what they're trying to optimize is their own optics within an organization, like you got to figure out, how do I get around
Mm.
this individual? Because typically doing something new is a somewhat risky endeavor. Like that at the end of the day, like experimentation and innovation has a lot of failure to it. That's the whole definition of it. That's what you're to some degree looking for, is learning. And that type of individual uh, is not helpful in that. In fact, they're the dangerous type of person that when something doesn't work, they'll say, "Oh, well, I told you so. I knew that from the
Mm.
beginning. This would never work. Let's not try that again." Well, that's exactly the wrong
Uh,
wrong response, and truly kills any type of culture that you may have around risk taking and innovation.
mm. On that note, I read, I remember reading Mr. Bezos's book back when he wrote it, and one of the big things, that the two takeaways I have, and forgive me, I may have them wrong, and I'm not sure if you know them, but one was, at what point should a leader make a decision as to how much information they have, before they can make a decision? I mean, obviously, if they have 10%, it's too early. You want to go, because time means everything, and it's not enough, and you can make a mistake. And if you wait till you had 100%, you may have missed the opportunity. So I believe the magic number was, if I'm not correct, was like 60%. Is that correct?
Um, So one of the Amazon leadership principles gets to this exact point, and it's called bias for action. Speed matters in business. Many decisions and actions are reversible and do not need extensive study. We value calculated risk taking. And so it's hard to answer. There isn't a right answer for that question in a completely universal or generic sense.
Hmm.
It completely depends on the type of decision you're making. Amazon has a helpful framework for this. It's called one-way door decisions or two-way door decisions. A one-way door decision is a decision that needs a lot more study, right? Because and you want to be patient with it. You want to revisit it. You want to take your time. You don't want to leap to action because it's a one-way door decision. It's not easily reversed. So an acquisition or an investment is a good example. Signing a contract is, depending upon the contract, is a good example of like, hey, we want to slow this down a little bit. We want to, probably have a little more information and discussion about it versus a little less. Versus a two-way door decision is one that if you're quote unquote incorrect about it, you can revise it, you can iterate, you can reverse the decision.
Hmm.
Those need to be made with the respect that speed matters in the business, right? So you need to have a good orientation of how to not suffer analysis paralysis, and where you really are leaning as complementary on data as well as experience. And then the other thing that plays a big part in the decision making is understanding like, when should this be a data rich decision, or is this a complementary data with wisdom decision?
Hmm.
And those two things need to, like, it does take a lot of experience of knowing like, when should this be a fairly analytical process versus when is this a little bit more about gut and some other intuition
Hmm.
plus appropriate data.
Data. Right. And which principle is it that a team should not be large enough to fit in one pizza?
Well, so that's not a principle. That's
Do I have it right?
a mechanism to
Yeah.
help accomplish something. So that it's called a two pizza team. It's not a two pizza meet. Some people have called it a two pizza meeting. It's not a two pizza meeting. It's a two pizza team. It's one type of team structure at Amazon, and what it recognizes, and it fits into a lot of it helps manifest or create the environment to help these principles be real, because a small team that owns a specific product. They own customers, they own the
Mhm.
roadmap, they own engineering, they own operations for it. that team is going to have better customer obsession. That team is going to have better bias for action. That team is going to learn and be curious more, like all of these things, because it's not just a small team, but this notion of it being more independent, more atomic in nature than the way most teams are set up. And so Amazon recognizes that entrepreneurs and small teams have a lot more fun. They move faster. They're more
Mm.
accountable. They care about their customers more. They innovate better than big organizations. And so they're trying to keep the best things that come along with small teams, recognizing that, it's now a big, full, mature company.
Hmm. Is there a specific principle that wouldn't apply to a small business? Like when I say small, let's say sub 10 million a year. Is there one that wouldn't apply?
Well, depends,
Mm.
is of course, my caveat, but there's one of the principles, the second principle, um, which is called ownership, and it says leaders are owners. They think long term and don't sacrifice long term value for short term results. There are times when you really do have to focus on short term results. It just depends upon the
Mm.
nature of your funding and the runway that you have, and everything, right? And so that is one where I would say, hey, I've been a partner in a restructuring firm, and that's when clients are in crisis, and it really is just like, hey, we are just trying to survive right now, right? And you are making short term moves that probably are not the best long term, but you don't have the cash flow or the reserves or the balance sheet, and so you're just trying to keep the boat above water. Then you kind of figure out, how do we create a longer term enterprise? So at times
Hmm.
that leadership principle may not be the right thing for a small team. One of the leadership principles is about invent and simplify. Invention isn't always an important aspect of every business. Being innovative is, and simplifying certainly is. But in some businesses, true invention is not an important aspect of a business model.
Hmm. Now you joined Amazon, like I said, 2002 to about 2005. I, I believe after about 20 interviews, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, as a pivotal times, right after the burst, it was very, very. I mean, AWS wasn't even around at that point. It was just '06, I believe. And so, what was it like there? What was the culture like there at Amazon? Because they were actually kind of toying with closing up at one point, correct?
I don't think they were toying with closing up. I think others were projecting, right? Amazon was
Ah,
referred to as Amazon.bomb,
that's right.
Amazon.con, Amazon.org, Amazon.toast. There's all sorts of play on words, and some analysts that really got it wrong. But I don't. Amazon never
Never did.
thought like, oh boy, here's the end of it. But it was a constrained resource environment at that point. And
Hmm.
and the leadership principle of frugality really meant frugality, and headcount was flat. And so when I joined in 2002 to help start the marketplace business at Amazon, I remember hearing afterwards, like bringing me on it wasn't controversial in terms of like, oh, we need this person or this is the right person. It was controversial and like, we can't add another senior person right now. Like, how are we going to do this? And when I was trying to corral a very small team for the merchant integration team and for a seller tools technology team, I literally had to go around kind of begging, borrowing, rationalizing, just to add a couple of head count, which is a very different environment than Amazon is operating in now.
Certainly.
The first holiday season that I was there, so holiday 2002, Amazon had its first $1 billion quarter. So Q4 of 2002 of 2002 was $1 billion quarter.
Hmm.
This year, Amazon will be a roughly $480 billion revenue company. But the way that people think about things, how they operate, what they believe in, the way some of the core mechanisms and structures and processes work are exactly the same. I'm always testing my
Wow.
understanding with people who are at Amazon have recently left. Like, hey, does it still happen this way? Do you still write a feature press release? Do you still, have metrics meetings that work like this? Like we were hammering out, we were forging how the culture that led into these leadership principles. These leadership principles, they weren't codified, they weren't written when I was there, but we were using them and we were figuring out like, well, how do we hold each other accountable? How do we prioritize things? How do we make a decision? What's a generalized way to approach a decision? And so we were creating the basis, which after a couple years after I left, these leadership principles were codified and formulated. And it was several years after I left Amazon. One of my clients at the Gates Foundation, he he recognized that I was taking little elements of Amazon and inserting them into our work. I never try to be a blunt hammer. I try to delicately, like, oh, here's a little adjustment we can make. Here's an experiment we can do. Here's a technique we can use that were all authentically from Amazon. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, like, hey, John, you should write a book because these are powerful tools and reference points that others can use to help get better results.
Mm.
And the smartest thing I ever did was talk him into being my partner on these books. And so we've done, 3 books. The Amazon Way, we just released the third edition last year. It's got a new forward in it from Tom Alberg, who was on the board at Amazon for 23 years. I wrote a new introduction, redid a number of the chapters, but these principles are truly the heart of how Amazon tries to operate. And they recognize, and everybody recognizes, like, that you fail every day at these, right? These are
Mm.
high bar principles and everything. But if you aspire, what's the saying, chase perfection and you'll catch excellence.
Mm.
I think that's a Vince Lombardi quote. I think these principles help, if you do them authentically and with wisdom, can help an organization do a better job at chasing perfection.
Does Amazon what is their feeling that you're writing these books and you have Amazon website? Are they pushing it more? Are they pushing it less? What is their
Yeah,
view?
great question. I've never had a formal endorsement, from Amazon, but
Right.
I have had Bezos' office refer multiple journalists and other people trying to understand. They refer them to me because they know,
Hmm.
like, I play it kind of, straight down the center of the fairway. And my whole thing is like, this is never about Amazon. It's about you, right? And
Right.
like, how are you going to compete? How are you going to scale? How are you going to create leadership and culture? That's what I am interested in what I take from Amazon. And I've had hundreds of people either interviewing at Amazon or that are at Amazon who've sent me a thank you note for writing the books and how much they've helped them and everything. And so I've, again, never had. I've had one very senior person reach out to me, and we had lunch, and he said, "What a nice job I did with this," and everything. But nothing directly from Jeff.
But you're never, I don't know what the term I'm going to use. Disapproving, scolding. It's always approving and adding on, and enhancing.
So what a great question. Like, in general, again, like, I'm not there to be an analyst of Amazon. I'm a student of Amazon
Right.
and other great leaders in companies to help others compete and win in the digital era. Like, that's my mission. I help companies compete and win in the digital era. I use a very strong set of tools, largely from Amazon, to help companies do that. I did, in this last version of the Amazon Way, write an introduction where I suggested a 15th leadership principle, but I wrote it and it
Hmm.
came from a place of like, I was looking, it wasn't a criticism. It was like, hey, I'm looking at the next 25 years. And I think there needs to be an adjustment to the leadership principles. Shortly after I released the book, Amazon came out with a 15th and 16th leadership principle that essentially cover the same space of the leadership principle I wrote. Was the title of it was the golden rule, right? And it basically encouraged them to, like, hey, you're no longer an entrepreneurial scrappy company. You are the 800-pound gorilla, and you need to always act bigger than other companies,
Mm,
and you need to think about the communities that you operate in. We need that as a democracy for you to create the same environment in which you were able to create this great company and stuff in. I can't say that I influenced those new leadership principles, but you also can't say that I didn't. And so and that's what I like about Amazon is they're one of the underlying traits is they're willing to rethink their position, both strategically and otherwise, and make adjustments on things like leadership principles. You should do that slowly, and it's like a constitution to some degree, right? Like you don't
mm.
want it to be a dynamic thing, but it does need to change and adjust over time.
And you make the point in one of your pieces again, that that golden rule, kind of following on that, there's some kind of missions that are a bit vague. Uh, you cite, like, don't do evil or whatever that is, and it's just kind of ambiguous. Whereas you want to kind of get specific in what the missions are and what the actual goals are of leadership.
Well, let me read exactly the leadership principle that I suggested to them was. So it was my suggested leadership principle, the golden rule.
Mhm.
Treat others as you would like to be treated. Employees, vendors, partners, brands, small companies, competitors, press, critics, community. Contribute and be a leading steward of our community. Foster and lobby not for your best interests, but for future innovation and competition's best interests. Conduct yourself, both personally and as an organization, in a way your mom and your kids would always be proud of.
Hmm.
Always. And so that was kind of like, I tried to write it like, hey, that, you couldn't kind of
Right.
squeak through it, that it would be fungible and usable in a wide variety of areas. And it's not to replace or supersede any other leadership principle. It's as a complement to it,
Right.
right? And so they came back with, a couple months later, they added two leadership principles. As I said, one was strive to be the earth's best employer, and the second was success and scale brings broad responsibility. And there's explanations under both of those. Those more or less cover the same area and the same set of challenges and the same accountability as the one that I had suggested for them.
In another one of your pieces, you recommend going back and reading some of the shareholder letters, and I went back and read the last three, and that was excellent reading. They're very, very good. That was a great recommendation there. I encourage others to do that.
I think they are so rich, and essentially what Bezos has been trying to do, I'd say, especially over the past 7 to 10 years, is give away Amazon's playbook
Mm,
and encouraging others, like, hey, if you want to know how I think about things, like what I'm prioritizing, I'm telling you in these newsletters is one way that he's telling you. I think it's the 2015 shareholder letter. He started with um, an interesting line, which was, "I believe we are the most. I believe we're the company that is best to fail at. I believe we're the world's best company at failure," I think
mm,
was the line. And what he followed up with was, most big companies embrace the idea of innovation, but are unwilling to suffer the string of failed experiments in order to get
mm,
there. So the failure that Jeff was talking about was experimentation based failure, not poor leadership failure, poor execution failure, poor intent failure, right? And that is so true about innovation is. essentially a scientific led test and learn approach. Most science starts from a position of failure, and then you get to slowly earn your way up to success. Business innovation is the exact same way. But operators, companies, people, and leaders and cultures that know how to operate well, they're used to dealing in a universe where success is typically the expectation. So those companies have a really tough time. They recognize that they want to innovate, but yet they don't understand like there's a different playbook that's
Hmm.
needed. Your operating playbook, how you scale and everything is really good, and you can continue to improve that from some of these lessons and from digital transformation. But if you truly want to get in the game of innovating, you need to understand it's a different leadership style, it's a different culture, it's a different set of strategies, and it's a different set of mechanisms, techniques that you need to employ in order to get there. And you need to really get to all four of those. So in my newsletter, the Digital Leader newsletter, this is the kind of one of the essential themes that I'm uh, dicing out there is like, well, how do you what is different about leadership? What is different about culture? What is different about strategy? What is different about techniques in order to create a company that is systematic about how it goes about innovating?
I assume you've met Jeff Bezos. What are your thoughts
Yeah,
on
we've
him?
we've traveled a few times. This was a long time ago. So I left Amazon in late 2005, and so any any firsthand knowledge of Jeff is pretty dated at this point.
Mm,
But what I can tell you, we I got to meet with him regularly, especially the first year and a half that I was at Amazon. We met every week to talk about launching the marketplace business and everything. It, I know the world has changed. I'm sure Jeff has changed. I've changed during that time too, and everything. But um, what Jeff loved was being a problem solver, right? A builder, a product person, like just digging in and like
mm.
truly, how do you understand the customer? How do you build a better solution? How do you scale something appropriately? And I think the very fair expectation that he had for his senior team was you should understand your business better than I do. And he would get frustrated when he would figure out something that you didn't understand the details of. And it gets
Mm.
back to one of the Amazon leadership principles, which is about diving deep and that leaders operate at all levels. And so I thought that was a very fair expectation. And I learned a lot about like, oh, you need to be able to both be excellent at operating deeply and understand the details. And that not only helps you build a better operating business for today, but it gives you insights in order so that you can, be better at these intuition based decisions that you need to make because you truly understand both your customer and your business, and you're going to be better at making bets because of that. So he was great to work with.
Hmm. Now he's no longer CEO, correct?
He is executive chairman. That's correct.
And he stepped back. Why?
I couldn't. I can guess at that, but I don't have any better knowledge than anybody else. I think like he just has a bigger life now and is doing a lot of different things. Blue Origin is
Right.
one of those things that's taking a lot of his time and efforts. And when you're truly the CEO at a company, like you got to be going to work every single day, right? And I think he probably just wanted a bit more flexibility relative to that, and you need to know when to say when. And they have a fantastic leadership team, and one of those leaders, Andy Jassy, kind of took the reign as the CEO. And um, I I think Amazon is extremely well set up to um, be successful with or without Jeff, or in whatever capacity he operates in, because the culture, as largely defined by these leadership principles, is just how they operate in the business.
Always go back to the founders of Google, and at some point, they decided not to be the CEO, and they stepped back and they brought in somebody and then hired who they have now, of course. But it takes a lot of maturity, for founders to do that, to, step back and say, I don't want to run this. Whatever the reason, I can't. I want to give to, somebody else needs to do it. And I see that happening with Mr. Bezos. There's so many other things that are happening, and it's time for somebody else to do it and bring it to the next level. I applaud that. Now, when you
But at Google, they did it very early, and
yes,
then after Eric Schmidt left, became the CEO again, and have since left and have somebody else being the
right,
CEO, and so it
Novell,
was a very different kind of timing,
yes,
and I think inspiration for why it was the right thing to do versus Jeff was
oh yeah,
the chairman, CEO, and president of Amazon for 25, 26 years. Um, so it was a different driver behind those two
oh,
circumstances.
absolutely. And they weren't a half a trillion dollar company when they hired that CEO, like
Yeah, right.
Amazon is. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not saying, yeah, there's some similarities, but certainly not all. And I'm going to guess in their case, in the Google case, they're more technical. They're more technical, and they just didn't have that kind of leader. I don't know for sure. I'm just going to kind of make that assertion. So when you joined in 2002, I mean, we kind of alluded this in the beginning. It was after the dot com, and by the way, one of your pieces you mentioned this in 1999. I think I have that date right. Amazon did one of the most revolutionary e-commerce things ever. It was free shipping.
yeah. I always play this game. When I'm given a keynote or something like that, like, "Hey, what do you think Amazon's biggest innovations are?" And
Right.
people will talk about Alexa or AWS or drones or something like that. And I go, hey, I'm gonna go back to the early days, and some really astounding innovations, free everyday shipping,
Yeah.
search inside the book, a detail page, a product detail page that has multiple um, offers for the same product, authentic customer reviews. All of those things were true innovations. The traditionalists, the industry experts were telling us this will never work. It's unsustainable. You don't understand retail, and all of them today are just, well, of course you have free everyday shipping. Well, of
Mm,
course you have authentic customer reviews. Like, these are just staples now of how most companies think
yeah.
about customer experience, and part of the experience is fulfillment and delivery, and the visibility and the expectations that Amazon has changed relative to that. And so part of that story is, first of all, if you truly are going to change an industry, change a customer experience that is truly better for the customer, you need to be willing to be misunderstood. You are probably going to have others that are telling you, like, that's not the way it works here, or something like that. Because so much of innovation is about looking for assumptions, gatekeepers, strategies, points of friction that other companies just like say, well, that's the way we do business, or this is the comfortable way that we do business because it doesn't rock the boat. But when you're a customer obsessed company, you those things aren't a priority for you. A better customer experience is what the priority is for you, and you're willing to break a few eggs in order to make an omelet,
Hmm.
in order to get to that better customer experience. And so, to me, those are great examples of relatively short time ago, right? Like, we're talking 20, 25 years ago, not that long ago. Nobody thought those things were the right thing or sustainable thing to do. And today they're just commonplace assumptions.
Hmm. Yeah, they certainly are, and I don't think Amazon gets enough credit for that because you buy anything from anywhere and you get upset if you have to pay for shipping, and that's 25 years later.
There's so many areas where Amazon has reset customer expectations You remember before Amazon, you'd order from a catalog, it would be not only would it be 2 to 4 weeks, but you would have no visibility as to
Right.
where it was, when it was coming, where was it in the delivery chain. And so it's not just the speed, customers love the precision, they love the control. And that helps reduce customer questions and customer comments, and it helps improve customer satisfaction, and it helps avoid misses with your customer. So that type of precision logistics completely changed the game.
Hmm.
The marketplace business that I helped launch, that essentially taught an industry how to do high precision drop shipping, because we held those third party sellers to the same shipping and delivery and fulfillment expectations and order cancellation expectations that Amazon, the retailer, had. And so in so many ways, we've Amazon changed both customer expectations and raised the bar for the entire industry. And now what you're seeing, not just because of Amazon, but because of so many other great consumer focused companies and experiences, we all have expectations that flow from our consumer experience that we expect in our B2B experiences. And I think that's part of the great next horizon of the digital era, is that there's still so much friction, hidden costs, gatekeepers, things that don't make sense in B2B experiences that companies are now innovating on top of in order to compete better. And that to me is progress and is exciting.
Hmm. You talk a lot about journaling and writing, how important it is.
Yeah, and not just on a personal basis, but as a part of this planning and executing and innovating process. Amazon uses a complementary set of writing exercises, but not just writing, it's writing and debating, writing and debating,
Hmm.
writing and debating with a set of colleagues around either what your proposal is, what your plan is, what your idea is, so that you understand it better before you proceed on it. And then at Amazon, they don't use PowerPoint. They take these narratives and future press releases and FAQs into senior leadership meetings. The meeting starts with 15 to 20 minutes of silence where senior leaders read these papers and then conversation comes. And so it doesn't dumb down the idea. The hard thing about writing is about getting to clarity. Clarity is both completeness of thought and simplicity of communication. And that's really hard to do on hard concepts. And so at Amazon, it's a completely kind of go slow to go fast approach of, we don't start cutting code, we don't start investing, we don't approve a project until we've thought it through these writing approaches. And there's a lot of academic work that's been done about how this is a better way to think as a team than PowerPoint or just getting together and talking about it. Getting together and talking about it is great, but capture it and then create a deliverable. And then the next conversation, you can start from there and peg it forward, right? You can move it forward. So that's a real hidden technique within Amazon that I use a lot in my own work, in my clients' work. One of the things I like about the approach is it scales. You can do it. You can really do it as just an individual. You can do it as a team. You can do it as a division, and you can do it at some moments. You don't have to do it all the time. So you can kind of ease into the transition in some way, but you have to realize like this process. It's hard. It's not easy. Not everybody has, it's not just writing skills, it's really thinking skills. But that's,
Mm.
at the end of the day, what you want is you want better thinking, um, and communication about what your concept, what your proposal is. So that's why I think it's just a vital way, especially on complex, nuanced concepts, to try to ensure that we aren't talking past each other and that we're capturing it so that we can move it forward, that we're neither restarting a conversation every single time, and that we can pass it forward to others with ease.
Hmm. Do you journal every day?
Yeah, I'm always writing every day. I can't say that I keep a personal journal, but I
Mm,
write both my newsletter and I've got a couple of books in the work, and so that is how I write and journal every day. Is like it's actually in my work.
I see. I
Do
re-
you journal?
it,
Do you journal?
It's funny. Just recently, I looked up some apps that help you journal. They send you reminders. They send you kind of teasers to make you think, and it's available on the phone and on the web. Because generally, I like pen and paper. I just kind of like to write cursive, and when I
Yeah.
type, I find myself seeing misspellings, and I go back, and it breaks my train of thought. I kind of like to spill it out. Do you write with pen and paper?
Yeah, well, I do write with pen and paper in kind of two key purposes. One of just taking notes during a meeting,
Mm,
um, and secondly, when I'm in kind of the messy creative phase of formulating a book or a piece that I want to write, or even a client situation, I find pen and paper and writing it out is I'm more reflective and I'm more creative,
mm,
versus it's kind of the same thing for you. When I start typing, my field of view narrows down, and
yes,
I become a bit more tactical versus, I don't know what it is, but I'm just in a more creative space when I'm writing
yeah.
about something on a pen and paper and in my notebook. So it's a combination for me. But then once I like on a book, once I figure out like, okay, here's the story I'm writing, here's the chapters, here's the mission for the book, then it's production time, right?
I
And
understand.
that's when I'm on the keyboard and I'm writing things out.
Yeah, I mean, even during our conversation, I'm right. I write. I just write when I think, and I can use arrows, and I use a grid paper so I can kind of slant things. And I don't know. It's just, it's perhaps it's just a bit more free. I'm not quite sure why, but perhaps you kind of gave me an idea. Perhaps not intentional, but sometimes I feel like typing, sometimes I feel like writing. So if I get one of these journal apps that kind of remind me to do it and I write, well, I'll just scan in that day's writing and I'll just put it in that day's, there's plenty of technology wraparounds there. It's not like you're limited there. So perhaps that's what I'll do. I do other things. I do meditation. I'm taking Italian back up. I do, I do 10 minutes a day on that. So just adding that and formalizing it, I don't think it'll be that much more difficult.
Great.
So on the podcast, we talked a lot. We talk a lot about discipline. I lost a lot of weight, and people ask me, how I did, like some magic, secret, or some bullet. I just say it's just discipline. I got focused. I had some bad news from the doctor, and I wasn't going to see my daughter, who, by the way, just graduated last week from Cal State. But
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. But so I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, how it plays a role in you speak, in your authorship, in your books, in these principles.
Well, I think it's kind of everything, and for me, it's about knowing like what are my goals for today, for this week, for this year,
Mm,
and then working backwards from those goals to like, okay, what do I need to get done today, this week, in order to hit those big goals? Writing a book is something that's important but never urgent, and
mm,
if you don't have the discipline that it takes to write a good book and then to be out meeting people and talking about it, and as PT Barnum said, without promotion something horrible happens, nothing, right? Like
mm,
yeah, then nothing ever gets done because it can always be pushed back a day or a week or a month. And so that's writing a book to me is the ultimate exercise in discipline. um, One of the back to Amazon and the Amazon way. one of the leadership principles, the 14th, is about delivering hard results. And the leadership principle talks about is focus more on the inputs of what you're going to do for complementing the output goals that you want, right? And so if your goal is, hey, I want to publish a book in a year, then well, what are the inputs, right? Oh, I need to have an outline of the book within 2 weeks. I need to have a book proposal within a month. I need to have first chapter 2 months in. Like and that's how Amazon approaches its planning. Is okay. Talk about your goals, the outputs you want, but spend more time debating and sharing and getting consensus and crisp thinking on, well, what are the inputs? What are the things we need to do that are more in our control
Hmm.
than the outputs would be? And I think that's a very helpful and productive way, whether it's as a business or as a person. And there's some helpful tools that kind of go along with this thinking. OKRs, objectives and key results, is a framework that aligns well with, like, hey, state what your objectives are, but then line up the key results that are more closer in and are more within your control, that you think lead to those objectives, and then plan around those key results. That to me is the same type of thinking of, like, start with the end in mind, start with the customer in mind, work backwards, but then debate more about, well, what are the things we're going to do to accomplish those, than just what the objectives are.
Hmm. And while none of the principles specifically cite discipline, it seems to be kind of the underpinning message.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There are, and part of it is about leveraging the principles, but there's many of them. I think especially diving deep is about having discipline in understanding your operations, and running a great operation wherever that is. That's part of discipline. But no, none of them address discipline as a specific, because it has to be, well, discipline for what, right?
Hmm.
And that's where I think leadership is about understanding the mission and putting the appropriate techniques, the appropriate tools, the appropriate communication in place in order to get a group involved in accomplishing that mission. And so, depending upon what your mission is, different leadership is really required.
Hmm. You work with a lot of leaders now, with owners. You do a lot of that kind of consulting now to kind of talk about these principles. Do you find sometimes, often, that a lot of the leaders are undisciplined, that they don't, there's a kind of a lifestyle choice there, and they don't want to grow, and there's
Not many, honestly,
good.
especially big company
Mm,
presidents and CEOs. In fact, they have an eye towards detail that is sometimes inspiring, but that can be a little problematic if you don't know how to pick and choose your moments on the
mm.
details, and everything. But I don't find that very often in enterprise grade, you know, presidents and CEOs, or senior people, at any level.
How about small businesses?
Yeah, sometimes in smaller businesses, especially, entrepreneurs,
Right.
and the discipline that I oftentimes find is a prioritization discipline, right?
Mm,
Okay, we want to accomplish this, back to, like, well, what are the things we're going to do in order to accomplish that? And then the discipline of kind of trying to say no to everything else, right? And
mm.
it's that, Michael Porter, who's a strategy professor, always talks about, well, strategy is about deliberately saying yes to a couple things and no to a lot of things. And
Mm.
so they aren't disciplined in staying focused on just the hard, critical few things that they have to personally be involved in order to accomplish the hard objective that they're trying to get to. And so that ability to be disciplined and saying no is where I see smaller entrepreneurs. They sometimes have a difficult time understanding that.
Very interesting. And a lot of times the entrepreneurs aren't really held accountable, so they're used to kind of not answering to someone, and they can kind of slide in those areas. So perhaps they lack it that way.
That's true, but I think the other thing that senior people suffer from is nobody's giving them critical feedback, right? Like nobody's saying like, "Hey,
Right.
like no, and everything, right?" And I am delicate in how I do that, but part of my job when
Hmm.
I'm an advisor with a team is to like be a little bit of their conscience in pointing out like, hey, we're saying yes to too many things here, right? We need to say no, or hey, and you always try to do this one on one. You never, your goal is never
Of
to
course,
embarrass
of
anybody, right?
course. Yeah.
Like, hey, I noticed when how you reacted to that update. That was an opportunity. That team was doing exactly the right thing. They just didn't get the output they wanted.
Mm.
You should have complimented them instead of kind of dismissing the effort, because guess what, everybody picks up on those cues because you're the president of this place.
Mm.
And so those are some of the coaching moments that I sometimes, I owe my clients to, and that's the problem is they operate in a vacuum and they don't have somebody helping them recognize their own natural tendencies.
I know joining a peer group for me made all the difference. I started my company in 93, and, I felt like I was alone on an island. I didn't have, people, critically,
Super smart.
and joining a peer group made all the difference because we're locked up in a room with these 12 business owners for 2 days every quarter. And, nobody cared if, you weren't feeling well that day. It doesn't matter, and, it's just accountability means a lot, especially to those small business owners. John Rossman, what motivates you?
My mission is to help companies compete and win in the digital era. Like, I like solving problems. I love collaborating and building with teams, like specific customers, specific problems, specific new concepts, in order to grow and innovate. And that's what really motivates me in the type of work that I like to do and hope I'm reasonably good at.
Hmm. And that's evident. That's evident in your material and just talking to you and all the pieces that we get to listen to and watch on your website and in your previous interviews. And how do you measure success?
When my clients make it their own idea and where you see habits being formed. So, your goal is, you're not a full-time member of the team, and your goal is for them to own it, right? And
Mm.
so it's both like getting the idea, you know, to test, to prototype, to market, but also like, oh, this team's going to do this again, right? It's now part of their DNA and their culture. That to me is real success.
Excellent, excellent answer, John. Thank you so much for your time today. A real pleasure. I enjoyed learning about you. I enjoy your material, and it's just I think you're doing great things. And specifically, I like I'm more the small business, and I'm in a managed service provider technology business, and a lot of it's technology led, and leadership and sales and marketing are really lacking in that space. And we need more people like yourself. So, how anybody listening, how can we get in touch with you?
Well, LinkedIn is I think the easiest way to get in touch with me. So John Rossman on LinkedIn. My website is rossmanpartners.com. My newsletter, the Digital Leader newsletter, you can find at Substack or just Google the Digital Leader newsletter. And then the book, The Amazon Way, in Kindle, in paperback, and Audible at Amazon.com, of course. And please write a review. That's the biggest
Yeah.
um, favor somebody can do for me is please write a review for the Amazon Way. It's super important. That's what helps keep the algorithm out there and
Moving.
everything. So it feeds
Yeah.
the algorithm.
And Rossman is Rossman. And of course, we'll put it in the show notes. John, thank you so much for your time today. I look forward maybe one day having a cup of coffee and diving in a little deeper and seeing if we could work together in the future. Thank you again so much for your time, and you be well.
Thank you for everything you do. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.